The massive crystal towers of Nexus Prime stretched into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the tallest tower, Admiral Kethvar stood before a wall of glowing screens. His 6 arms moved gracefully as he reviewed reports from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian hegemony controlled 847 star systems, and Kethvar was the military mind behind their power. Today was different. Today brought something new. "Admiral," his aide whispered, approaching with careful steps. "We have received a transmission from an unknown world." Kethavar's large black eyes turned toward the smaller Zephyrian. "Unknown? That is impossible. We have mapped every world in this sector. The signal comes from a small yellow star, 3rd planet. They call themselves humans." The word sounded strange in the alien language. Kethvar clicked his mandibles together, a sign of curiosity. "Show me." The main screen flickered to life. A human woman appeared, standing in what looked like a primitive facility. Her skin was dark, her hair pulled back, and she wore simple clothing compared to Zephyrian robes. "Greetings," the human said. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, speaking for the people of Earth. We have detected your empire's expansion toward our star system. We come in peace and hope to establish trade relations with your civilization." Kethvar's mandibles clicked faster. The other Zephyrians in the command center gathered around the screen. Dr. Vasquez continued. "We understand you are a powerful, spacefaring civilization. We are new to space travel ourselves, but we have much to offer. Our world is rich in resources, and our people are eager to learn and share knowledge." The transmission showed images of Earth, blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, cities with tall buildings that looked primitive compared to Zephyrian crystal architecture. "However," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice becoming serious, "we must warn you against any aggressive expansion toward our system. While we prefer peace, we will defend our world if necessary." The screen went dark. Silence filled the command center for several moments. Then Kethvar began to laugh. His laughter was a high, musical sound that echoed through the crystal halls. Soon, other Zephyrians joined him. "Warn us?" Kethvar gasped between laughs. "Did this primitive creature just warn the Zephyrian hegemony?" He activated his personal communicator. "Send this transmission to all fleet commanders. Let them see what passes for diplomacy among the lesser species." Within hours, the human transmission was playing across hegemony space. In war rooms and officer clubs, Zephyrians watched with amusement as the tiny human dared to threaten their empire. Kethvar called his war council together. The greatest military minds of the hegemony gathered in the crystal chamber, where they had planned the conquest of hundreds of worlds. "What do we know about these humans?" Kethvar asked. General Thexala activated a holographic display. "Our long-range sensors show a single planet with approximately 8 billion inhabitants. Their technology is extremely primitive." The display showed human weapons, guns that fired metal projectiles, explosive devices powered by chemical reactions, aircraft that still used fossil fuels. "They have recently developed nuclear weapons," Thexala continued, "but their most powerful bombs are only equivalent to our personal sidearms." More images appeared. Human spacecraft that looked like metal tubes with fire coming out the back. Clumsy, slow vessels that barely escaped their own gravity well. Their fastest ships would take them hundreds of years to reach the nearest star, another general reported. They have only just begun to explore their own solar system. Kethvar studied the data. "What about their military?" "Laughable," Thexala said. "They still fight wars with projectile weapons and chemical explosives. They have no energy shields, no plasma cannons, no reality manipulation technology. Their largest warships are smaller than our shuttlecraft." The room filled with the musical laughter of Zephyrians. These humans were like children playing with sticks, while giants wielded the power of stars. "Admiral," a younger officer spoke up, "perhaps we should simply ignore them. They pose no threat to the hegemony." Kethvar's laughter stopped. His black eyes glittered with a dangerous light. Ignore them? No. These humans have given us something much more valuable than resources. He stood and walked to the center of the room. They have given us an opportunity. We have just conquered the Vorthak Empire. Our newest subjects need to see what happens to those who oppose us. The War Council understood immediately. The hegemony had recently added several species to their empire. Some were restless, wondering if they could resist Zephyrian rule. A public demonstration of power would remind everyone why resistance was futile. Earth will be our example, Kethvar continued. We will show the galaxy what happens when primitives dare to threaten the hegemony. General Thexala nodded. How large a fleet do you recommend? Kethvar considered this. Too small a force might struggle against the humans' crude weapons. Too large would suggest the hegemony took the threat seriously. 40 ships, he decided. A patrol fleet, enough to handle any resistance but small enough to show our contempt. Who will command? Sub-Admiral Veltar. This will be good experience for him. Fighting primitives should teach him the basics of conquest. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. Sub-Admiral Veltar was young and ambitious. He would arrive at Earth expecting easy victory. The humans would resist with their primitive weapons. Veltar would crush them effortlessly. The entire galaxy would watch and learn. Kethvar activated the communication system. Across hegemony space, the message went out. In 3 months, a Zephyrian fleet would demonstrate their power by conquering the primitive world that had dared to threaten them. The reaction was immediate. Betting pools opened on how long Earth would last. Some predicted hours, others gave the humans a full day. No one expected them to survive a week. On distant worlds, recently conquered species watched the preparations with interest. The Vorthaks, who had fought the hegemony with honor codes and traditional tactics, whispered among themselves. Perhaps they would learn something from watching how the Zephyrians dealt with desperate primitives. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the same facility where she had recorded her message. Around her, human scientists and military officers worked frantically. Deep space sensors had detected the Zephyrian fleet's departure from Nexus Prime. 3 months, Captain Marcus Chen said, studying the sensor data. They're giving us 3 months to prepare. Or to surrender, Dr. Vasquez replied quietly. Chen looked at her with steel in his eyes. Are we considering surrender? Dr. Vasquez thought about her children, about all the children on Earth. She thought about the human spirit that had carried them from caves to the stars. She thought about every generation that had faced impossible odds and somehow found a way. To survive! No, she said. We fight. Across Earth, the message went out. Humanity's first contact with an alien civilization would be a war for survival. The aliens expected easy victory over primitive humans. They had no idea what humans could do when their backs were against the wall. They had never seen a species that refused to accept defeat. They had never encountered the terrible creativity of humans who had nothing left to lose. The Zephyrian hegemony was about to learn why Earth's threats should never be dismissed. Sub-Admiral Veltar felt excitement flowing through his veins as his fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Around him, 40 Zephyrian warships materialized in perfect formation. Each vessel was the size of a human city, armed with weapons that could crack continents. Beautiful, Veltar whispered, looking at the primitive star system spread before them. A yellow sun burned at the center, with small planets orbiting like toys. The third planet, Earth, showed blue and green through his sensors. Sub-Admiral, his communications officer reported, "We are receiving multiple transmissions from the human world." "Put them through," Veltar ordered. He expected pleas for mercy, offers of surrender, perhaps even worship of their superior technology. Instead, he heard something unexpected, Unknown alien vessels. This is Captain Marcus Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You are entering human space without permission. Turn around now or face the consequences. Veltar's mandibles clicked with amusement. Around the bridge, other Zephyrians laughed softly. The humans still thought they could threaten the hegemony. Reply to them, Veltar commanded. Tell them, we have come to accept their surrender. They have 1 hour to submit, or we will take their world by force. The response came immediately. This is Captain Chen. We do not surrender. We do not submit. If you want our world, you will have to take it. More laughter filled the bridge. These humans were either very brave or very stupid. Veltar suspected the latter. Begin the attack, he ordered. Target their orbital installations first. Show them our power. The Zephyrian fleet moved forward, their energy weapons charged with a sound like distant thunder. Veltar expected the humans to flee or beg for mercy when they saw the true might of the hegemony. Instead, the humans attacked. It was not an attack like anything Veltar had ever seen. Human ships came from everywhere at once. Some rose from the planet's surface. Others appeared from behind moons and asteroids. More came from the outer planets where they had been hiding. But these were not the primitive vessels shown in the intelligence reports. These ships looked wrong, like they had been built by madmen. They were covered in extra armor welded on without care for appearance. Weapons stuck out at strange angles. Some ships looked like they had been strapped to. Massive bombs! What are those? Veltar demanded. His tactical officer studied the sensors. Sub-Admiral, they appear to be civilian vessels that have been converted for combat. Cargo ships, passenger liners, even mining equipment. Are they trying to ram us? The answer came seconds later. A human ship that looked like it had once carried freight slammed into the side of a Zephyrian cruiser, but instead of simply crashing, it exploded with the force of a small star. The Zephyrian ship cracked in half, atmosphere and crew spilling into space. Impossible, Veltar breathed. They destroyed the glorious victory with a cargo ship? More human vessels rushed toward his fleet. These were not attempts to ram. These were guided missiles the size of buildings, piloted by humans who showed no fear of death. Veltar watched in horror as ship after ship in his fleet took damage from these suicide attacks. The humans seemed to have no regard for their own lives. They threw themselves at Zephyrian vessels like they were trying to stop an avalanche with their bare hands. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from one of the human ships. Put it through. Captain Marcus Chen's face appeared on the screen. Behind him, Veltar could see that the human ship was badly damaged. Smoke filled the bridge, and sparks flew from broken equipment. You wanted to see what humans do when cornered? Chen said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. Watch, carefully. The transmission cut off. Veltar's sensors showed Chen's ship accelerating directly toward the Zephyrian flagship, but this was not a simple ramming attack. Sub-Admiral, the tactical officer shouted, that ship's reactor is overloading. It's going to explode! Evasive action! Veltar commanded. Too late! Chen's ship struck the flagship's shields and detonated. The explosion was so bright it temporarily blinded the sensors. When they cleared, 2 Zephyrian dreadnoughts were gone, simply erased from existence. Around the battlefield, human tactics made no sense to Zephyrian military doctrine. Humans hid among their own civilian population, launching attacks from hospitals and schools. When Zephyrian forces tried to target military installations, they found humans had built weapons inside refugee centers and orphanages. They're using their own people as shields, the tactical officer reported, disgust clear in his voice. But it was not cowardice. The humans were not hiding behind civilians. The civilians were fighting too. Veltar watched in amazement as human cargo haulers, fitted with mining lasers, attacked his patrol ships. Old humans, young humans, even human children helped reload weapons and carry ammunition. This was not warfare as the Zephyrians understood it. This was something primal and desperate. The humans fought like cornered animals, but with the intelligence to make their desperation deadly. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than predicted," the tactical officer reported. "Current casualties are at 40%. 40%? Against primitives?" Veltar could not believe it. The humans had technology, centuries behind Zephyrian science. Their weapons should barely scratch hegemony shields. But somehow, the humans had found ways to make their primitive weapons effective. They concentrated fire on single targets, overwhelming shields through sheer numbers. They used their own ships as weapons, turning every vessel into a potential bomb. They fought with tactics that no honorable species would consider. "Sub-Admiral," another officer called out, "the humans are using some kind of new weapon." On the screen, Veltar saw human ships firing projectiles that looked like simple metal rods. But when these rods struck Zephyrian vessels, they penetrated deep into the hull before exploding from inside. "How are they bypassing our shields?" "The projectiles are too primitive, sir. Our shields are designed to stop energy weapons and advanced missiles. These simple metal rods pass right through." Veltar felt a chill run through his body. The humans had found a weakness in Zephyrian technology by being too primitive for their defenses to recognize as threats. The battle raged for 6 more hours. With each passing minute, Veltar lost more ships to human tactics that defied all military logic. The humans refused to retreat even when facing certain death. They turned every defeat into a victory by making it cost the Zephyrians more than they could afford. When the surviving human forces finally retreated, Veltar counted his losses. 24 ships destroyed or too damaged to fight. Nearly 60% casualties against an enemy that should have been helpless. "Sir," the communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving surrender terms from Earth." Veltar's hopes rose. Perhaps the humans had finally seen reason. Instead, he heard Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice. "To the alien fleet, you have won this battle, but you have lost something more important. You have shown us who you really are. You have taught us that mercy is a luxury we cannot afford. Remember this day because we will." The transmission ended. Veltar stared at the blue and green planet below. His fleet had won, but it felt like defeat. They had conquered Earth, but at a cost that made victory meaningless. Worse, he had the feeling that this was not the end. Dr. Vasquez's words echoed in his mind. The humans had learned something from this battle. They had seen Zephyrian technology, up close, studied their tactics, found their weaknesses. Veltar began writing his report to Admiral Kethvar. How could he explain that 40 ships had barely managed to defeat a primitive world? How could he describe the terror of facing an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare? He settled on the simple truth. The humans were not like other species. They fought without honor, without logic, without regard for their own survival. They were savage and unpredictable and absolutely terrifying in their determination. But even as he wrote these words, Veltar knew that Admiral Kethvar would not believe them. The High Command would see only victory and dismiss the warnings about human savagery as excuses for heavy losses. They would learn the truth soon enough. The humans were still out there, scattered among the stars, carrying their knowledge of Zephyrian weaknesses into the darkness, and they would be back. 5 years had passed since the fall of Earth. In the crystal towers of Nexus Prime, Admiral Kethvar reviewed reports of successful mining operations on the conquered human world. The hegemony had stripped away Earth's forests and mountains, extracting valuable minerals while the surviving humans labored in work camps. The Earth problem, as Kethvar called it, appeared to be solved. He was wrong. Hidden in an asteroid field far from any Zephyrian patrol route, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of Station Prometheus. The facility had been carved from the inside of a massive asteroid, its chambers filled with recovered human survivors and salvaged alien technology. Around her, the best minds that had escaped Earth's fall worked day and night. Engineers studied captured Zephyrian weapons. Scientists analyzed alien biology from blood samples taken during the battle. Tacticians planned operations that would have been impossible 5 years ago. "Status report?" Vasquez asked Captain Sarah Rodriguez, who had taken command of military operations after Marcus Chen's death. 73 hidden facilities now operational, Rodriguez replied. "We have approximately 2 million survivors scattered across 40 different locations. Most are mining ships or research stations that the aliens ignore." Vasquez nodded. The Zephyrians had made a crucial mistake. They thought like conquerors, focusing on major population centers and obvious military targets. They had not considered that humans might scatter like seeds in the wind, setting up new colonies in places too small or remote to matter. "What about equipment?" "Better than expected. We've reverse-engineered their shield technology, though our version is much cruder. We can't match their energy weapons, but we've found ways to improve our kinetic weapons using their power sources." Doctor. James Park, the chief scientist, looked up from his workstation. "Elena, you need to see this." Vasquez walked over to where Park was studying a holographic display of Zephyrian anatomy. The image showed the alien's internal structure in detail, with various organs highlighted in different colors. "I've been analyzing the biological samples we collected," Park explained. "The Zephyrians have some interesting weaknesses. Their respiratory system is extremely efficient but also very sensitive. A chemical that would barely affect humans could be lethal to them. Poison gas? More sophisticated than that. I'm working on a targeted pathogen, something that would affect only Zephyrian biology while leaving other species unharmed." Vasquez studied the data. "How long?" "Give me 6 more months, and I can have a working prototype." This was the kind of innovation that had kept humanity alive for 5 years. Unable to match Zephyrian technology directly, humans had found ways to work around it. They built weapons from salvaged parts. They developed tactics based on their enemy's psychology rather than their own strength. Most importantly, they had learned to think like humans instead of like the civilized species the Zephyrians were used to fighting. "Commander Rodriguez," Vasquez called out, "Show me our current operations." Rodriguez activated the main display. A map of local space appeared, showing Zephyrian positions in red and suspected human activities in blue. "We have 3 types of operations running," Rodriguez explained. "First, pure harassment. Small raids on mining facilities and transport ships. Nothing that does serious damage, but enough to make them nervous." Blue dots appeared on the map, showing hit-and-run attacks across dozens of systems. To the Zephyrians, these looked like the desperate actions of scattered refugees. They had no idea these attacks were coordinated from hidden command centers. Second, intelligence gathering. "We've planted surveillance devices on major hegemony facilities. We know their patrol schedules, supply routes, and communication protocols." More blue dots appeared, this time around major Zephyrian installations. Vasquez was impressed by how thoroughly humans had infiltrated their enemy's operations. Third, preparation for major operations. "We're positioning assets near critical targets and waiting for the right moment to strike." The final set of blue dots showed human forces positioned near important Zephyrian facilities. Not enough to threaten them directly, but enough to cause serious damage if they all attacked at once. "How many Zephyrians know we still exist as an organized force?" Vasquez asked. "Very few. Most think we're just scattered survivors causing random trouble. Admiral Kethavar's reports classify us as minor insurgent activity that will fade away as the survivors die off." Vasquez smiled grimly. Let them think that. Human insurgent activity was about to become something much more dangerous. Captain Rodriguez, I want you to implement Operation Ghost Ship. Rodriguez grinned. About time. Ghost Ship was humanity's most ambitious project. Using captured Zephyrian technology, human engineers had built ships that appeared on alien sensors as space debris. Old asteroids, dead satellites, pieces of destroyed vessels. But hidden inside each piece of junk was a fully functional warship. The beauty of the design was psychological. Zephyrians were a proud species who believed in the superiority of their technology. The idea that primitive human ships could hide from their advanced sensors was literally unthinkable. Start with the Kepler mining station, Vasquez ordered. Full documentation. I want every moment recorded and broadcast across hegemony space. The Kepler mining station was a typical Zephyrian operation. Massive extractors stripped minerals from a dead planet, while a small garrison protected the facility. The Zephyrians had grown complacent after 5 years without serious human resistance. They had no idea that 3 asteroids drifting near their station were actually human warships. The attack began at what humans called 0 hour. The asteroids suddenly came alive, shedding their outer shells to reveal sleek predator ships underneath. By the time Zephyrian sensors detected the threat, human weapons were already firing. But this was not the desperate ramming attacks of 5 years ago. These humans had learned to use Zephyrian technology against itself. Their kinetic weapons fired rounds that looked like debris to alien sensors. Their shields used modified Zephyrian generators that confused enemy targeting systems. The mining station's garrison never had a chance to call for help. The humans jammed their communications, isolated their weapons, and systematically destroyed every defensive system. Within an hour, the facility was burning wreckage, but the most terrifying part for the Zephyrians was what the humans did next. Instead of simply destroying the station, they downloaded its entire computer system, personnel records, operational procedures, communication codes, supply schedules, everything. Then they vanished, leaving behind only a message painted on the station's hull in letters large enough to be seen from space. Earth remembers. Similar attacks began happening across hegemony space. Mining stations exploded. Transport ships vanished without trace. Garrison commanders found their facilities sabotaged in ways that should have been impossible. The Zephyrians tried to respond, but they were fighting shadows. Human ships appeared on sensors as space junk until the moment they attacked. Human infiltrators used stolen Zephyrian technology to bypass security systems. Human tactics made no sense according to civilized military doctrine. Worse, the humans seemed to know everything about Zephyrian operations. They attacked at exactly the right times, in exactly the right places, using exactly the right methods to cause maximum damage. What the Zephyrians did not know was that 5 years of careful intelligence gathering had given humans complete maps of hegemony operations. They knew patrol schedules, supply routes, communication protocols, and security procedures. Dr. Park's biological weapons were ready ahead of schedule. Human engineers had perfected their ghost ship technology. Captain Rodriguez's tactical teams had identified hundreds of high-value targets. Most importantly, Dr. Vasquez had developed something the Zephyrians could not understand or counter, a human strategy based on terror rather than conquest. The hegemony was used to fighting other civilized species, honorable enemies who followed predictable patterns and fought according to established rules. They had never faced an enemy that refused to play by those rules. Humans did not want to conquer the Zephyrian hegemony. They wanted to destroy it. Not just its ships and planets, but its confidence, its superiority, its very sense of safety. Every successful human attack carried the same message. Nowhere was safe, no one could be trusted, and the Zephyrians' technology was not as advanced as they believed. In his crystal tower on Nexus Prime, Admiral Kethvar was beginning to receive reports that made no sense. Facilities destroyed by invisible attackers, ships that vanished without sending distress calls, equipment that failed at exactly the wrong moments. His subordinates offered theories. maintenance problems, accidents, random equipment failures, technical issues that came with managing a large empire. Kethvar dismissed their concerns. The hegemony was strong. Their technology was superior. The idea that scattered human survivors could threaten 847 star systems was absurd. But deep inside his mind, a small voice whispered warnings he refused to hear. The voice reminded him of Dr. Vasquez's final transmission. "Remember this day, because we will." The humans had remembered. They had learned, and they were coming. The War Council chamber on Nexus Prime buzzed with nervous energy. Admiral Kethvar studied the holographic display showing hegemony space, but the map looked wrong. Red warning indicators marked dozens of locations where Zephyrian facilities had suffered technical failures in the past month. "Explain this to me again," Kethvar demanded, pointing at a cluster of red dots near the Rigel sector. General Thexala cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, the mining station at Kepler 442 suffered a complete reactor failure. All personnel lost. The transport ship Stellar Pride experienced navigation system malfunctions and crashed into an asteroid. The garrison at Vega 7 reported equipment failures before communications were lost." Kethvar's mandibles clicked with irritation. "And you believe these are accidents?" "What else could they be, sir? Our intelligence shows the human survivors are scattered refugees barely managing to survive. They lack the technology or organization to threaten hegemony facilities." But Kethvar had been receiving disturbing reports from frontline commanders. Stories of ships that appeared on sensors as space debris until they opened fire. Attacks that showed impossible knowledge of Zephyrian security protocols. Equipment failures that happened at exactly the worst possible moments. "Show me the Kepler 442. Incident again," he ordered. The holographic display changed to show the wreckage of the mining station. The facility had been completely destroyed. But what caught Kethvar's attention was the message painted on the largest remaining piece of hull. "Earth remembers." "Sir," General Thexala said carefully, "this could be the work of other insurgent groups trying to blame humans for their activities." Kethvar was about to respond when his communications officer rushed into the chamber. "Admiral, urgent transmission from Sub-Admiral Veltar at the Centauri facility." The main screen activated, showing Veltar's face. The young officer looked terrified, his usual confidence replaced by panic. "Admiral Kethvar, we are under attack by unknown forces. Our sensors show nothing but space debris, but we're taking heavy fire from multiple directions. Behind Veltar, explosions lit up the bridge. Alarms wailed as Zephyrian crew members shouted, in their musical language, 'Sir, the attackers are using our own communication codes. They're jamming our transmissions and—'" The transmission cut to static. Kethvar stared at the empty screen. Around him, the War Council stood in shocked silence. "Get me a connection to Centauri," Kethvar ordered. "Sir, all communications with the facility have been lost." Far from Nexus Prime, Dr. Vasquez watched the destruction of the Centauri facility. From the bridge of her flagship, Resurrection. The ship had been built from the hull of a captured Zephyrian dreadnought, modified with human technology and crewed by survivors who had nothing left to lose. "Facility secured," Captain Rodriguez reported. "All defensive systems neutralized. Garrison eliminated. Casualties? Minimal. The ghost ship tactics worked perfectly. They never saw us coming." Vasquez nodded. This was the 15th major Zephyrian facility destroyed in the past month. Each attack followed the same pattern. Approach disguised as space debris. Jam communications, strike fast and hard, download all computer systems, leave a message, disappear. But this attack was different. This was the beginning of Operation Prometheus. "Dr. Park, are your teams in position?" The scientist's face appeared on a secondary screen. He was aboard a stealth ship positioned near the Zephyrian homeworld itself. "Ready for deployment, Elena. The atmospheric processors on Nexus Prime are completely unprotected. They never considered that someone might attack the air itself." Park's biological weapon was a masterpiece of human creativity. It would not kill Zephyrians, but it would turn their homeworld sky red for months. Every time they looked up, they would see the color of human anger. "Captain Morris, what's the status of the network intrusion?" A third screen showed Captain David Morris, formerly a computer programmer, now humanity's most effective cyber warrior. "We're inside their quantum communication network. It took us 3 years to crack their encryption, but we finally found the back door. When you give the word, we can inject our virus into every major Zephyrian facility simultaneously." Vasquez felt a grim satisfaction. The Zephyrians had built their empire on the belief that their technology was superior to all others. They were about to learn what happened when that technology was turned against them. "All teams, begin Operation Prometheus." Across hegemony space, human forces that had been hiding for 5 years suddenly revealed themselves. But this was not a conventional military attack. This was something far more terrifying. A campaign designed to destroy Zephyrian confidence in their own superiority. On Nexus Prime, Dr. Park's team released their biological weapon into the atmosphere processing systems. Within hours, the planet's sky began to change color. Blue faded to purple, then to deep red. The effect would last for months, a constant reminder that human science could reach even the hegemony's heart. On 17 major worlds, Captain Morris's computer virus infected Zephyrian networks simultaneously. But this was not random destruction. The virus was designed to make Zephyrian technology unreliable in specific ways. Defensive shields would fail at the worst possible moments. Communication systems would broadcast human propaganda instead of military orders. Life support systems would create minor but terrifying malfunctions that reminded everyone how dependent they were on technology. Most devastating of all, the virus infected the Zephyrian military database, replacing training materials with recordings of human attacks. Every time a Zephyrian officer tried to access tactical information, they saw images of their own ships burning. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez said, broadcasting on all Zephyrian military frequencies, "my name is Elena Vasquez. You may remember me from our first diplomatic contact 8 years ago." Her image appeared on screens across hegemony space. But this was not the hopeful scientist who had first contacted the Zephyrians. This woman's eyes held the cold fire of someone who had lost everything and found something harder than despair. "You dismissed our warnings. You treated us like primitives whose threats were not worth considering. You conquered our world and enslaved our people because you believed your technology made you superior." Behind her, the Bridge of Resurrection showed human crew members working with calm efficiency. These were not desperate refugees. These were professional soldiers who had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. "You were wrong. Technology is not what makes a species strong. Will is what makes a species strong. The determination to never give up, never surrender, never stop fighting for what matters." On the main screen, images began to play. Burning Zephyrian facilities, exploding ships, panicked alien faces as their superior technology failed them. "You taught us that mercy is a luxury we cannot afford. So we learned. We adapted. We became something you cannot understand. Humans with nothing left to lose." The broadcast showed more images. Zephyrian prisoners being treated humanely in human facilities, proving that humanity had not lost its moral compass despite everything. But it also showed the wreckage of alien worlds, proof that human mercy had limits. "Your empire spans 847 star systems. You could have had 848 if you had chosen friendship over conquest. Instead, you chose to teach us that the only language you understand is force." More explosions lit up the screen. More Zephyrian facilities burned. But the most terrifying images were yet to come. "We know everything about your empire. Your patrol schedules, your supply routes, your security codes, your weaknesses. For 5 years, we have watched and learned and prepared." The final image. showed a complete map of hegemony space with human forces marked in red. There were hundreds of them, positioned near every major Zephyrian facility. This is not random terrorism. This is not desperate revenge. This is war fought by humans who have learned to use your own superiority against you. Admiral Kethvar watched the broadcast from his command center, horror growing in his chest. The map showed human forces everywhere, hidden among the asteroids and debris fields that Zephyrian sensors ignored. The attacks you have experienced are just the beginning, Dr. Vasquez continued. We have weapons you cannot detect, tactics you cannot predict, and a determination you cannot break. We are the species that crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. We are the species that splits atoms and bends space to our will. Her voice grew cold with promise. We are humanity, and we are angry. The broadcast ended. Across hegemony space, Zephyrian commanders stared at empty screens, finally understanding the true scope of what they faced. On Nexus Prime, Admiral Kethvar looked up at the red sky and realized that his empire's greatest enemy was not another civilization seeking conquest. It was a species that wanted something far more dangerous than victory. They wanted justice. 6 months after Operation Prometheus began, Admiral Kethvar stood in what remained of his command center on Nexus Prime. The crystal walls were cracked from human attacks. The red sky outside cast bloody light through the damaged ceiling. Around him, the greatest military mind of the Zephyrian hegemony struggled to understand how completely they had been defeated. The reports told a story of impossible destruction. 43 worlds lay in ruins, their surfaces scarred by weapons that should not have existed. The hegemony's once mighty fleet was scattered across the galaxy, too afraid to group together because human forces seemed to know exactly where they would be. Status report, Kethvar said wearily. General Thexala consulted his damaged tablet. Sir, we have lost contact with 17 core systems. The outer colonies report constant harassment from human forces. Our supply lines are completely compromised. What about our fleet? 60% casualties. The surviving ships are requesting permission to retreat to the inner systems, but... Thexala hesitated. But what? Sir, the humans seem to be everywhere. Our captains report that even in systems with no known human presence, their equipment malfunctions at critical moments. They're afraid to trust their own technology. Kethvar understood their fear. The humans had done something worse than destroying Zephyrian ships. They had destroyed Zephyrian confidence in their own superiority. Every piece of technology now seemed suspect. Every routine operation might hide a human trap. The empire that had conquered 847 star systems through overwhelming technological advantage now questioned whether that technology was reliable. Sir, his communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission through Vorthon intermediaries. The humans are requesting a meeting. A meeting? Terms of discussion, sir. They've suggested neutral ground. Kethvar felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans were not offering surrender. They were demanding his. 2 days later, Kethvar's shuttle landed in the ruins of his own throne room, the massive crystal chamber where he had once planned the conquest of hundreds of worlds was now open to the red sky. Broken walls and shattered decorations spoke of the human attack that had crippled Nexus Prime's defenses. Dr. Elena Vasquez was already waiting for him. She stood in the center of the ruined chamber, wearing simple clothing that looked practical, rather than ceremonial. Behind her, human soldiers in captured Zephyrian armor maintained security. But what struck Kethvar most was her eyes. 5 years ago, Dr. Vasquez had been a hopeful scientist seeking peaceful contact with alien civilizations. The woman who faced him now had been forged in the fire of war and loss. Her eyes held the weight of billions of human deaths and the terrible satisfaction of justice finally served. Admiral Kethvar, she said simply. Dr. Vasquez. He approached. Slowly, his 6 arms spread in a gesture of non-aggression. You wish to discuss terms? I wish to see you understand what you have lost. She gestured to the ruined chamber around them. This was your seat of power, the place where you decided the fate of species across the galaxy. Do you remember what you said when you first received our diplomatic transmission? Kethvar's mandibles clicked nervously. We underestimated your capabilities. No, you underestimated our spirit. She walked to where his throne had once stood. Now only twisted metal remained. You saw our primitive technology and assumed we were weak. You confused our restraint with inability. We made errors in judgment. Dr. Vasquez turned to face him fully. Admiral, you commanded 847 star systems. You could have had 848 if you had chosen friendship over conquest. Your empire could have traded with humanity, learned from us, grown, stronger through cooperation. She paused, letting the weight of that lost opportunity sink in. Instead, you chose to teach us that mercy was a luxury we could not afford. Kethvar felt the truth of her words like physical blows. The hegemony's arrogance had created their own destroyer. By dismissing human threats, they had forced humanity to become exactly the kind of enemy that could destroy them. What do you want? He asked quietly. Justice. She activated a holographic projector that showed the current state of hegemony space. Red zones marked worlds under human control or too damaged to function. Yellow zones showed areas where Zephyrian forces remained but faced constant attack. Green zones, representing secure hegemony territory, were scattered and small. Your empire is finished, Admiral. Not because we destroyed it, but because we proved it was never as strong as you believed. Kethvar studied the map. Even the green zones looked vulnerable. Human forces had demonstrated they could strike anywhere, any time, using weapons and tactics that Zephyrian military doctrine could not counter. The species you conquered are watching, Dr. Vasquez continued. They see that the mighty hegemony can be defeated by a primitive race using superior technology against itself. Some are already declaring independence. Others are forming alliances against you. This was true. Reports had been coming in of rebellions across hegemony space. Species that had accepted Zephyrian rule for centuries now questioned whether their masters were as invincible as they claimed. What are your terms? Kethvar asked. Dr. Vasquez gestured, and human soldiers brought forward a document case. The Soul Accords, she said. Not a peace treaty, terms of surrender. Kethvar read through the document with growing amazement. The terms were surprisingly reasonable for a defeated empire. Zephyrian worlds would be allowed to govern themselves. Their technology would be preserved. Their people would be treated with dignity. But there were conditions. No military forces beyond system defense, he read aloud. No expansion into previously unconquered space. Full reparations to enslaved species. Immediate release of all prisoners. And, Dr. Vasquez prompted, Kethvar found the final clause. Recognition of human space as sovereign territory. All Zephyrian forces to withdraw beyond the established boundary. He looked up at her. You're dividing the galaxy. We're establishing rules. Your empire will survive, Admiral, but it will no longer grow through conquest. Humanity will oversee this sector of space, ensuring that species here develop according to their own choices, rather than Zephyrian preferences. Kethvar considered this. It was humiliating, but it was also survival. The alternative was watching his entire civilization burn as human forces completed their campaign of destruction. And if we refuse? Dr. Vasquez's expression did not change, but somehow her presence became more menacing. Then we continue what we started. 43 worlds have already fallen. We can destroy 43 more, then another 43 after that. We have learned patience, Admiral. We can take as long as necessary to finish this. She stepped closer. But perhaps you would prefer to avoid that outcome. Perhaps you have learned something from watching your empire burn. Kethvar thought about the reports flooding in from across hegemony space. ships destroyed by invisible attackers, facilities sabotaged by untraceable infiltrators, technology that failed at exactly the wrong moments. His people lived in fear of an enemy they could not see or predict. Worse, they lived with the knowledge that their technological superiority was an illusion. Humans had proven that primitive weapons guided by superior tactics could defeat any defense. "I will sign your accords," he said finally. "Good." Dr. Vasquez produced a signing stylus. "But first, I want you to understand something." She walked to the edge of the ruined chamber, where the broken wall looked out over the red landscape of Nexus Prime. "When we first contacted you, we offered friendship. We warned you against aggression because we hoped you would choose a better path. We gave you every opportunity to be the civilization you claim to be." She turned back to him. "You chose conquest instead. You chose to see our warnings as threats to be dismissed rather than wisdom to be considered. You forced us to become the enemy you deserved." Kethavar approached the document, stylus in hand. "There is one more thing," Dr. Vasquez said. "Children on Earth are learning about this war through holographic displays. They see the burning worlds, the destroyed fleets, the fallen empire, and their teachers explain humanity's greatest lesson to the galaxy." She watched as he signed the Sol Accords, formally ending the Zephyrian hegemony's age of expansion. "What lesson?" Kethavar asked. Dr. Vasquez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Never mistake restraint for weakness. When humans say, 'Please don't make us angry,' they're giving you one chance to avoid learning why that's good advice." Outside, the red sky of Nexus Prime began to fade as Dr. Park's biological weapon finally cleared from the atmosphere. But the lesson would remain. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear of Zephyrian conquest now told stories of the humans who refused to accept defeat. They spoke of Earth's children, scattered among the stars, carrying the message that no empire was too mighty to fall if it chose arrogance over wisdom. The age of human expansion had begun, and it would be very different from what came before.